Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of the Carvel Community Meeting. Today's date is March 13th, 2024. If you're watching this recording from home, we encourage you to come join us live. We meet every second and fourth Wednesday of the month at 8 a.m. Pacific time. It's a great opportunity for you to come and meet the maintainers, meet other members of the community, ask questions, provide feedback, or just sit and listen. You don't need to engage, not a requirement, but if you have anything you are uncertain of, it's a good way to get some live feedback and one-on-one time. For those that are on the call and you do have something you want to discuss and you haven't put it in the agenda yet, just put it down here in the discussion topics section and we'll get to it towards the end of the meeting. And if you aren't able to join us live for these meetings and you still have questions and need to get in touch with us, there are several ways for you to do that. You can find us in the Carvel channel and the Kubernetes Slack workspace. You can email us. You can find us in any of the find us in GitHub in any of the project repos, or you can find us in X at, I swear my soul kind of dies every time I say that, X at Carvel_dev. And if at any point you are interacting with us or any other members of the community, we ask that you please read and abide by our code of conduct, which is linked here and throughout all of our repos. If you are using the Carvel tools, we want to know more about how you're using them. So we've created this pinned issue. A similar issue like this is in all of the repos. So this one's in the kind of general Carvel repo, but then all the different tools themselves have one. So for example, the YTT repo has, are you using YTT? But this one's more general, so you can just list out any of the tools that you're using, provide details on your use cases, details about yourself, any company that you work for, and if they're using the tools, and provide a PNG logo of that company, which is optional. It just helps us just kind of know how people are using them in our development process, and it also helps the community see how others are using it, so they have a better understanding on how they too can use those tools. So we'd really appreciate your participation there. It really helps us. Moving on to attendees, just a reminder to put your name in the attendee spot here. I'll put mine in because I always forget. And then be sure to put any organization that you represent, although that is optional if you don't want to share that information. Moving on to announcements. So Carvel will have a presence in KubeCon in Paris, which is next week. It's just wild that that's already upon us. Feels like we were just in Chicago. But we are heading to Paris. I will not be there, unfortunately, but Salmik and Praveen will be there representing Carvel. So what does that look like? We have a lightning talk, which is one of the engagement opportunities that CNCF provides projects that are under the CNCF umbrella. And that lightning talk will be on Tuesday, March 19th at 11:40 a.m. And Praveen and Salmik will be presenting that. It's going to be in Pavilion 7, level 7.1, room D. And I'm told the capacity for that room is 800. So pretty large room, very exciting to see that. I think it'll be pretty packed in there. The lightning talks tend to be really popular, so make sure you get your spot in there before it fills up. It's going to be just like a series of back-to-back project lightning talks, so you can get kind of like a really like almost speed dating round of all the lightning talks. Sorry, of all the projects. Next up, we have so New for this KubeCon, they changed it up to where sandbox projects only get kind of one slot as an option for a kiosk in the project pavilion. Previously, we were able to do all day, every day of the conference, but I think it's just kind of getting oversaturated. They have too many projects. So this is their way of still offering that opportunity, albeit just a shortened version of it. So you can find us in the project pavilion, which is inside the solutions showcase on Thursday, March 21st from 10:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. or 10:30 to 13:30. And the project pavilion kiosk number is PP4-B. The only way that you can see this map is if you go to the website. It is not listed anywhere else. So here's the project kiosk directory, and you can find it up here. We are PP4-B right here. And this is within the solutions showcase map right here. So that's where the project pavilion is in the grand scheme of things of the project or the solutions showcase. So here's the main entrance, and it'll be right here next to the meals and seating on this side. And I know that they're going to be doing new also for this year, project tours throughout the project pavilion. So they're, just trying to get more people aware that this exists, because in previous years, it seems to be one of those that hasn't been talked about too much. So if you're in Paris, come stop by during this time. We'd love to chat. And last but not least, we have a talk on Friday, March 22nd at 2:55 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. And it's kind of like a more of like a beginner level about Project Carvel, about all of the tools, to try to get people more familiar with the tools. And that's with Daniel and Salmic. And Daniel's an employee at Broadcom under the Town Zoo umbrella, and he's been a pretty big advocate for Carvel tools. So if you're still in Paris around that time, come check us out. And that's going to be in Pavilion 7.1, Room A. No releases to speak of since our last meeting, so we'll move on to status updates. What is a status update for project roadmap for the release package repository as tar?
This is on Joao and Somic. They need to spend some time on reviewing the work done by Ashish, and hopefully even the proposal needs to be merged.
Anything else to add to that one before I move to the other one? Okay, cool. Then the dependency management one. Any updates here?
We do have a topic to talk about that in the discussion topics.
Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. And it looks like nothing to share as far as what the team's working on backlog wise. Cool. Then we'll get to the heart of why we are all here. Okay, so last week Joelle put this committee discussion topic in the Slack channel about the idea of a steering committee discussion on Slack. I've kind of put some ideas out there before about like I kind of envisioned if we got more people from other companies forming a TOC, but I think a steering committee is also a good idea. I like what Bryce had put in about operator framework, what BuildPEX has done. Joao, did you want to kind of talk more about this and what you're envisioning?
So like a couple of weeks back, we talked about we talked about rejiggering our permissions in GitHub, right? And creating teams and so on. And then when I was about to just cut admin access to everybody for the org, I was like, wait a minute. We need somebody to manage this. So that's where this conversation kind of popped up. And I think that we are already at a time where us as a community is in need of having some sort of a group of people that are responsible for driving the community forward. And I think that the creation of a steering committee or a technical oversight committee would be something that would benefit the community as a whole. And that would allow us to be more like, not that we are not community friendly, but to even portray that more than we do right now. Because like in one way, if you look at our community meetings, you'll see that there's like a bunch of Broadcom stuff there, right? You'll see that the amount of people that work in Broadcom is pretty big, and that can be a little bit daunting when you're starting to go into a new project. But if there are things like steering committee or talk, maybe that can help people to be more confident on the community itself. So the main thing that I'd like input as of right now is, what do we think it's like the best next step for us? Do we think that we should have a talk or a steering committee? I don't think that having two for right now, like for the size of the community that we currently have, it makes sense, because we're not yet a Kubernetes project, right? But we'll get there. But we're not yet there. So I don't think we need to have 20 people just taking care of management and stuff like that. So I'd like to have some input from y'all. What do you think it would be the best thing for us to have next? If it have something of us, have a steering committee that would be kind of responsible for the admin stuff and trying to set up a roadmap for us and push the current maintainers to work towards that and so on, or have something more technical where it will also do some of the admin stuff, but it will more focus on how can we evolve Carvel as a whole. How can we make it better and more aligned with what our customers want. So I think in some sense, I like to have a little bit of a better understanding what kind of committee that we want, in order for us to be able to create some sort of a proposal that would contain this, and then we can discuss what are the things that we want. That what I'd like to get started here and to have a better understanding is what type of committee do we think we need right now?
So I noticed that the operator framework governance docs are shared on the screen right now. So I'll shed a little bit of light on the decision that we made. And for people that don't know me, I'm Bryce from Red Hat, and I'm a steering committee member for the operator framework community. And we're coming in to the Carvel community and trying to help, build better tooling and build OLM, like the future of OLM on top of some of the Carvel tool suite. And so, we're definitely interested in like a steering committee, TOC, what have you, to help steer the direction of the projects. And the decision that we made in the operative framework community is a steering committee because our structure in the operative framework is that we have multiple sub projects that don't necessarily all feed up into like one larger tool suite. So like we have OLM, we have the operator SDK, and then we have like some other things related to both of those. Those are like the two main sub projects, but really they're separate things. So OLM and operator SDK feed up into like the operator framework umbrella tooling, but they're considered separate sub projects. So they have their own folks that are like determining direction for each of those individual sub projects and things like that. So the operative framework steering committee is more so like on the admin side of things, making sure that when new sub projects want to be added, it makes sense that they're added. They meet all the criteria. The steering committee are responsible for handling like CNCF things, whether that's like KubeCon, getting booths, things like that. So that's kind of the direction we went with the steering committee. I think that you could, if you wanted to have a group that is both responsible for that admin level type stuff, but also the technical things, you could add something into your steering committee member, like your steering committee member responsibilities to have some of that technical oversight. But I do wonder if maybe it makes sense to have maybe a separation of those responsibilities. You can have folks that are more interested in the admin community building side of things, and then some that are more interested in the technical focus of like what is the technical direction that the Carvel tool suite is going to go. I don't think it hurts to have both, even at a smaller community scale. But I'm also not, super well versed in forming those things. So just on the operator framework side of things, wanted to share like why we went the direction we did.
Well, like that's very helpful to have like that input for somebody that already has something like this. And like my main concern is that like we have too many committees and then we don't have like enough maintainers for the rest, like that people just like start focusing more like one or the other. So like I that's my main concern.
Yeah, and I think it does make sense if you want to consolidate it down into one, that like you could have the admin plus the technical responsibilities there. And I think in the operator framework, we kind of are like, the steering committee members are kind of intertwined as both people who make technical decisions on the sub projects that they are representing in the steering committee, but also having that admin responsibility. So there's like some balance there. I think the Carvel stuff is a little bit different than what we're doing on the operator framework side, because I think like everything kind of feeds up into that Carvel umbrella and like all ties together nicely, compared to like there's some tie-in between some of the sub projects in the operator framework, but there's also some level of separation between them, and those responsibilities that they have.
I think a good first step would be creating something like outlining like pros and cons of each as they relate to Carvel. And then sort of figuring it out from there, what would make the most sense for Carvel. Like between a steering committee and a TOC.
And maybe there's some middle ground that Carvel creates a new type of committee.
A technical oversight steering committee.
Yeah, there you go. A TOSC.
A task. Okay. Sure. So we can noodle on this for a little bit. I can also see if there's any steering committee meetings or like talks that are in KubeCon. So Samik and Praveen, if you all are able to attend them, maybe get some info there. Maybe it'll help us kind of get some more details. Maybe figure out what's the best way to proceed. All right, moving on, unless
before I move on, like we are calling these things by the names that they have, like that of things that exist somewhere else, right? Like we're talking about talks, steering committees, and so on, because they are kind of established names. But in the end, what we really want is just to have some sort of a group that has some sort of like responsibilities on making sure that Carvel is moving forward. Because even though like our current governance is pretty wide open and it's like all maintainers get together to get decisions and so on, I think we are somewhat at a point where we have a good number of maintainers, but sometimes it's hard to have somebody to lead some of the work, or lead some of like changes and so on. And I think that the most important thing that I would like to get out of this is to have somebody that at least creates some accountability for us to make sure that Carvel is moving forward. So in some sense, we're trying to bucket us into names that we already know, but as you mentioned, like we don't need to restrict ourselves there to those names, and we can call us whatever, like something, and it only depends on what we write then on the governance, like what are the responsibilities of this group of people. And definitely I think maybe mixing the two is a good idea. The only just to go back to the like just more food for thought for people, is that like currently our current governance is split by project as well, where we have each tool is kind of its own, let's call it, as its own career ladder, right? On it, and that I think has been okay till this point, but I think now we are at a point where we want to progress Carvel as a whole, so we need to change that a little bit. I'm not saying that it doesn't make sense the model that we have right now, but I think we just need something like a lead on top to help us make sure that everything is all snugged together and we can move things forward. Like for example, our website, we haven't touched our website in forever, and maybe like our messaging there should be different, and we need somebody to drive that, but we don't have anybody to drive or to make us accountable for that, for example. And I think that kind of is like, it's like just one example of something that I think that having somebody that some bodies that kind of keeps us accountable for those things could help. So think a little bit about that. Let us talk about that in the next community meeting to see if there's like anything, or just reply to the thread that Nancy posted on the community meeting document, and let's go from there. Okay.
Cool.
Go for it, Nancy.
For what it's worth, I did try to like help out with the website stuff. Like it's been a project off and on for sure. And I think what's been the issue is lack of, I think, accountability, or like, yes, this is all needed and here's what needs to be done. But I think there's what's missing is like, who's going to write the new content? And then who's going to design the website? Like who's going to redesign it and who's going to come up with like the new messaging? I think that's where we always get blocked is like trying to create new messaging overall. Okay, I'm moving on to Google's season of docs. So Renew, you said that you would want to take this on in creating the project proposal for it.
Yep. I will try and create a proposal for this. And as you said, having what should be the look and feel of our docs and the website is something that I think we have struggled for quite some time. I will try and put something together to see if we all can agree as to what should be the messaging that we want and how should the individual projects be handled in the overall picture. Like, what is Carvel? What is Carvelizing? What is a Carvel package? What is the workflow that we want to promote for people who use the packaging tools that we have, and how can these tools be used, and what should be the end product? Like, how should these be consumed by users or people who install these packages? What I think these are the thoughts that are on top of my mind. I will try and see if we can put it into a project. What I want to understand is also that will we have to find the person ourselves, or they will provide us a person if this project is selected? And no, or is it just going to be
I think it's similar to how LFX does the mentorship. It's like there may be like ones that will come and say, oh, I want to work on this, and then we select the best one we think we would want to take on the role.
But like that's not what it says, the first line there. Organizations must source their own technical writer. So we need to hire somebody, and Google Season of Docs will pay for it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it says technical writers interested in working with organizations participating in Google Season of Docs may be found in this repo. So I think it's like we don't go seeking out. It's more like there's ones that are like already saying they want to participate, and then we find them.
Like we select them from the list that already exists. So there's like a pre-selection of candidates.
Oh, 404, look at that.
There are 404 people already. Oh, that's gonna be easy.
Okay.
There's an interesting folder there. Interest technical writers. Maybe there's people there already.
There's, well, maybe, I don't know, maybe that's not available yet until proposals are submitted.
So I'm not familiar with the Season of Docs stuff, but I have through a Kubernetes SIGs project done the Google Summer of Code. I would be surprised if it follows a drastically different process, but the typical process for the Summer of Code is that like you submit your proposal as a project and say like this is the stuff that like we have that we think would be suitable for somebody looking to have some of their first contributions to this project kind of lead. And then that goes out and interested contributors will draft up their proposal for stuff, like how they would go about it, submit that, and then as the project maintainers, you would review individual contributors' proposals, work with them on refining them, and then at the end select one, and then that's the person that will contribute to your project, and you're signed up to be a mentor for them. It sounds like season of docs might be different, but again, I was always thinking that they were pretty similar in nature. So that be interesting if it's drastically different.
Yeah, there's two, different things to click on that front page. It's, if you're a project or organization wanting to participate, and then here's the technical writer one if you want to participate. And it's submit a statement of interest directly to the organization. In your statement of interest, you'll show how you will achieve the goals set out in the organization's project proposal. So yeah, it is pretty confusing based on what this other selecting technical writer. But it sounds like it's probably like around the same similar process as you mentioned for the Summer of Code.
Yeah, if it helps, I imagine. So for all the Summer of Code stuff that I've done, it's gone through like a CNCF based repo that the proposals go to. And there's some people that I think work for CNCF that manage that. I can try to dig up that repo and send it in the Carvel channel. And you guys should have access. You should have access to that because Carvel's a CNCF project, so you guys should be able to submit proposals there. They might have a little bit more information on what the CNCF process is for that for individual projects looking for to be involved in the season of docs.
Yeah. That's a good call. It's interesting. I haven't seen anything from CNCF about announcing this to the projects. So I wonder if they're going to be participating in that and like project wide. But yeah, cool. I'm going to move on from this since we have only 24 minutes left and a lot more to discuss, but thank you, Bryce, for all your help with that. Okay, moving on to the CAP CRD upgrade safety pre-flight proposal. Bryce, you want to talk about this?
Yeah. So for folks that aren't aware, this is for adding a additional. So I recently added pre-flight checks to the CAP deploy or like anything that has to do with deploying applications via CAP. There's a pre-flight flag that enables you to allows you to enable or disable pre-flight checks. Right now, I think the default is that all are disabled by default, and so specifying a check in that pre-flight flag will enable it. This is a proposal for adding an additional pre-flight check implementation for validating that when CAP identifies that in the diff there's a update to a custom resource definition resource, that it would perform a safe update operation, which essentially means like you're not going to do an update that will cause data loss or potentially break clients that are using an older version of that CRD. So the general thing is just safety around like not breaking clusters or anything accidentally when you have updates to a CRD, and this is particularly useful for folks that are using the Carvel tool suite to build and deploy, Kubernetes cluster extensions, like controllers and CRDs and things like that, and making sure that when you go to upgrade that the version of that controller or something like that using CAP or a CAP controller that the CRD upgrades will be safe. So the default is that it would be disabled. So you can opt in if you want to make sure that when you're using CAP, any upgrades to a CRD resource are safe. There's a few checks that are I think there's like 4 checks that are like a guaranteed breaking change. One of those is removing a stored version, changing from namespace to cluster scope, adding a new required field, and removing an existing required field. So we're going to have explicit checks for those 4 things. Something that gets a little bit more nuanced is the changes, like updates to existing fields. So there's some valid changes that can take place there, but there's also invalid changes that can take place there. Like you shouldn't be changing the type of an existing field. Like that's a breaking change. Removing an enum value, that's a breaking change, but adding a new enum value is less restrictive, so that's not a breaking change. So there's some logic there, but this proposal is proposing like we get a basic implementation in, and then we can iterate on what those valid update operations are. There's somebody from the operator frameworks. There's another engineer from the operator framework side already looking into like getting a more exhaustive list of what are some of those valid updates to existing fields that we can go ahead and add some static checks for. But the idea is that this pre-flight check is going to be best effort, and it's going to be mostly a static check against the old version of a CRD and a new version to quickly identify like what are some obviously breaking changes and preventing those from being applied to the cluster. So I think that this proposal has been approved by Praveen, and that is now into like a lazy consensus period. I think the plan was to announce like how long we wanted that period to be during this time. I don't know what the typical proposal process is. This is my first proposal for any of the Carvel tooling, so I'll leave that up to some of the maintainers. But yeah, so just a quick introduction of that. I also have a draft PR for like a basic implementation, and then also depending on the consensus period and things like that, I have a question around like if the maintainers would like me to have multiple PRs that like we iterate and build on top of, or just one big PR that does like majority of the implementation, and then leave the rest for iteration. So yeah.
Thanks, Bryce. Like I have already approved the proposal, and on the thread, like initially we thought of like end of this week as the timeline for folks to like raise concerns or if they have anything that they want to add to it. But if someone wants more time, like to let us know, maybe we can extend by 1 or 2 more days, or maybe like by end of next week. But if not, then I guess it would be good to finish by end of this week.
Cool. That sounds good to me. Yeah. So if any, we can say end of this week is lazy consensus.
Before we go with dates, so according to our governance, there's a minimum of 5 days for lazy consensus. The only thing that we don't talk about is when that period starts. So maybe let's do it starting today, and we'll have 5 working days till to get something. And 5 working days is what, Tuesday?
Sure. Yeah,
If I'm
that sounds
not mistaken. Just so we are there, but definitely it's interesting because I was reading because I remember that we had some of that on our governance, but I guess that we need to add a little bit of an addendum there saying when does this period start, and maybe it would make sense to start when we have an official approval, and maybe like when you talk about that on the next community meeting. So it would start counting from the next community meeting, I think. So we can have like the announcement. But that's a different topic that we need to fix in our governance.
Yeah, one thing I'd note on that is in the operative, so OLM has a weekly community meeting, and so we've taken a similar kind of thing where like once it's announced in the community meeting, that's when the lazy consensus period really starts for like our proposals and stuff. With Carvel's being a wider gap between how often the meetings are, I wonder if maybe it makes sense to have like a way to announce it in Slack or something like that. It's like, hey, this has been approved, and now let's enter that 5-day lazy consensus period. That way, you're not having to wait. Like, if the proposal goes right, say like a proposal is approved right after this meeting, it's not having to wait like 2 more weeks before it can enter that lazy consensus period.
Or do we switch to weekly community meetings? Bah, bah, bah.
That's also.
We have played around with our community meetings since I first caught on in January of 2021. We've gone weekly, we've gone bi-weekly, we've gone back to weekly. But I think like we're starting to pick up more steam than maybe even weekly makes sense. Because we're starting to get, more like from y'all and from others, like some pretty big discussion topics. And waiting 2 weeks each time is, I think, not good for progress. So something to consider across the team as a whole, like should we move to weekly? But I do like the other thing you suggested. In the meantime, once it's like announced on Slack, that's when and then we'll announce it on Twitter and wherever we can. That's when the lazy consensus period starts.
Cool. Yeah, I think that sounds good. In the meantime, well, figuring out some more of the meeting cycles. So in terms of, I'll keep it in a draft state until the proposals reached consensus, the consensus deadline. I think Samik and Praveen typically are the ones that are probably looking at, or are going to be the ones looking at that PR. Would you guys prefer the one big PR? Like, because some of the operator firmware engineers, we kind of broke it up behind the scenes as to like, let's have like a generic implementation, and then we can have individual PRs for adding some of those required validators that like we know are definitive breaking changes in like an iterative cycle. I can keep it at like the basic implementation. My branch currently has some of those validators changes in place on them. So like however you folks feel most comfortable with it being broken up, I'm happy to work with you guys on making sure it's the easiest to review or whatever.
So iterative definitely sounds better, but if you do need like a larger set of changes to go in the beginning, I'm good as long as they're like split into legible comments, I guess, like just for ease of reviewing,
Okay, cool. Yeah, that sounds good.
Praveen, I don't know, like, what do you think?
Yeah, +1 to that. Like individual commit messages should be fine.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so right now it should be broken. Like everything added to that PR should be broken up by like a PR merging commit, because we're doing PRs against a branch that I have up. So hopefully that should be logical enough. If it gets to be too large, I know it's a pretty large line count, but it's because of some vendored file changes. So if it gets to be too big of a PR, definitely feel free to ping me and I'll do whatever we need to do to break it up into the smaller iterative PRs and just like line them up and go through that process. So yeah.
Sounds good.
Cool. The next one is also you, Bryce.
Yeah. So as part of some of the Red Hat engineers and stuff contributing to that branch that I have, we've noticed that the code header requirements have like a VMware specific tag to them. With this being a CNCF project and graduation criteria requiring multiple entities contributing, some folks mentioned that like it might make sense to bring it up in this community meeting today of maybe changing that code header to not say VMware specifically, but maybe something like Carvel maintainers or something of that nature that is more company agnostic and is more representative of community contributions than a single corporate entity.
Yeah, we talked about that previously, but unfortunately, I don't think we had bandwidth to do it. As you can see, like there was an issue for that since September last year, but we never came around to do that. So if anybody is interested in contributing that change for all the tools, we're more than happy to have that changed. And like on the new files, you can already, for your PR, right? You can just already change the headers.
Oh, okay. I can look to change it. I thought it would fail CI because it doesn't match explicitly the header file. And so I wasn't sure if it would make
we can start with kapp, right? Like we'll have to change this, so we can just change that, start that with kapp and then just change and have it then on your PR as well. Not on the same PR, like different PR, but then the new files that you create for your PR could have the new header already.
Yep, that sounds good. I'll bring it up and maybe we can get a few more people other than because I'm happy to take this on, but I'll also bring it up to some of the Red Hat folks that might be interested in getting like a first contribution into some of these repos. Maybe this is a good first opportunity for them.
Awesome. Thank you, Bryce. I'll put that in here.
For the time, Praveen, do you want to go on the next one? Well,
Yeah, thanks, Joel.
Yeah. Okay. We just have 8 minutes. I won't go over the proposal, but I think like I can just give a brief overview. Basically, we are trying to allow users to mention what are the dependent packages that a particular package depends on and how they can install those dependencies while installing that particular package. Like there are lots of API changes that are there in both package and package install. And I think I did get a lot of questions and feedbacks. I think I have answered all the questions and yet to incorporate those answers into the proposal yet. But if anyone has like any concerns or any questions, to let me know on those.
Personally, like the big feedback that I'd like to have for this particular proposal is if there are like any cases that we did not account for, for package management. That would be good for us to have added to this proposal, so we can have like the biggest chunk of it. So that would be great. So if you have like any use case that you like after reading this, you think like, oh, what about like this thing? What will happen if this thing happens? Like if we're in this scenario, what happens, right? I think that would be great to enhance this proposal as much as possible. I'm quite sure like this is like a very big change. Just creating like a package manager, it's not easy, right? So we're gonna make mistakes and things are going to be strange. I'm quite sure in the beginning. But another thing that I would like us to think about is that this is like a first step for the work. We would like to encompass as many use cases as we can for this proposal, but I'm quite sure we'll not be able to encompass everything. But please take a read to the document. If there's any use case that you think that should be addressed here, please let us know. And we'd like to move this forward soon-ish. So, yeah.
I was planning on taking a look at it today because I haven't had a chance to take a proper look at it yet. But I think I recall some of the other folks from the operative framework raising some questions around like, how does this work with things like CRDs and things like that? Because that's one of the things that with OLM and operator specific package management has been an issue around dependencies because of the Kubernetes global API system. So I don't know if you guys have responded to those comments yet. I'll probably see it later today. But just if there's any insight as to that off the top of your head, I'm definitely happy to hear it. Otherwise, I'll just look at the proposal.
So it depends on like what do you mean by CRDs, right? Like there's this there's only so much that we can do as well in order to make account for like all the scenarios here. But if you have any questions, like I haven't gone through the comments. I do see that Praveen replied to the majority or like everything that we have there. So if there's anything else apart from what has been added, just let us know.
Will do. Thanks.
I think I had raised a lot of questions and then Praveen answered them all. But there's only one that I just did think about, which I'm not sure if we want to cover or not in the dependency management. But there are a lot of cases of it depends dependencies. For example, if I define ingress on my thing, then I have to have an ingress controller installed, right? Like there are things that depending on the values that someone is supplying to a package, a dependency may be needed or may not be needed. If I'm not implementing the service mesh, then I don't need Istio there. If I am, then maybe I do. The question is, has that been considered? Is that just out of scope? Are we thinking of maybe dependency management that can be conditional as well based off of values supplied to a package install? Because that's the one use case that I didn't see addressed that I can think of that would make a lot of sense.
Praveen, you gonna go for it?
Yeah, sorry, just trying to wrap my head around it. So based on the values, we decide if we want to install a dependency or not.
Exactly, because there are so many cases where just the stupid ones of Helm charts from Bitnami all include include Prometheus monitoring. If I select yes, then I have to have Prometheus operator because it's going to create service monitors. But if I'm not enabling monitoring, then why do I need Prometheus monitoring for my application? Right. But like that would be a great way of being able to do the conditional things. That's just a very common example. External secrets, that are starting to get in more and more public, Helm charts, Prometheus operator, things like that that are very common to see used by a lot of packages, but that are not hard dependencies of the application itself, just of a secondary aspect of whatever package I want to install.
It sounds a lot similar to like one of the use cases that we were discussing some time back. I think like the major concern was that if we do it based on the values, then we would have to like, you know, the implementation details of the package itself. Like it would be much more convenient from the package author side if they like have certain rules which decide which dependencies to install based on the values. But yeah, we had like we were debating on both the sides.
So like something that like I think we found our use case for the optional dependencies, right? Where
Yeah.
you can add a dependency as optional, and then when you're doing the package install, you can say that I don't want that dependency to be installed, right? So in some sense, it's not maybe as like versatile and powerful as like reading values to like interpret things, right? But it could give at least some of the control that you're talking about, Scott, I think.
Right.
Like,
by default, install it and then have the ability to opt out of installing it. So we're going to install for any use case that this package may have the dependencies. But if you don't want Prometheus operator, then just say on this, mention this dependency, skip or whatever.
yes. So like there's like I don't know if we ended up adding it to the API or not, but there's like one field on the dependency that is called optional. That you can say that is optional, that can be present or not. And then the package install would have the ability to override saying like I don't want that.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's definitely not as versatile, but it covers the use case, meaning it makes it definitely possible to solve that situation where I don't want Istio installed just because technically Knative can work with Istio, for example.
Yeah, because making it like more versatile, like making it more like based on like values, I think it would be interesting, but then it would require us to process, like have some sort of rules that you could provide as part of the package.
Right. I would see it almost as you would
And-
give like JSON paths. Like there would be under the dependency, you would have like JSON paths and like match expression type things on like conditional, and that would be like a match expression almost of the path within the values and what it is. The question comes when someone doesn't supply a secret with their values, then what ends up happening, and then you actually have to pre-process also the underlying values, and if it was Helm or if it was YTT, and which values are you going to look at and what the defaults are. So maybe a way of doing that would be that you don't actually look at what's in the package. You only look at if there was a secret reference of values, you would look at the values that are there. And someone has to set then in that conditional default true or false, and then have a conditional based off of a JSON path within the YAML values file.
that definitely looks like another proposal by the level of complexity that we want to do. So I think that if we want to do something that is like as versatile as that, I think we need to extract that out, or else that might have like a couple of nuances there.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, so we are past time. Is the one that is mentioned at the last bit, is it a quick thing? Or would that require more details and discussion?
Yeah, Nancy, it is a quick thing. So for YTT, I think right now the only approval is Dimitri. I'm not able to get his attention on this PRs.
It's
I
fine.
wanted to know who else
I'll
can
look into
review.
these PRs today.
They are small
And-
enough to think check.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll look into them today. And so like we do have like another part that is like as part of our governance that if we don't have somebody that is looking into this, if there's approvers from other tools, they can look into these PRs. So I'll look into them since I think I'm the only other approver for other tools. So
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Cool.
But nevertheless, like one thing that I'd like before we wrap this up, it's like more a general thing. If you review a PR, even if you're not a reviewer, it's perfectly okay for you to say, I approve this, and not just say, looks good to me, just say, I approve this PR. Because like in situations like this, an approver for other tool can just come in and say like, okay, somebody that usually works in this tool that is not an approver or something like that for this tool approve this. So this gives me more confidence that this is like a good PR that can be merged and can be easier for us to review. So one thing that I would like to ask everybody is if you are reviewing PRs and instead of just saying looks good to me, just you can say looks good to me, but thumb it up, like just put an approval on it. Okay. Just as a more general comment about PR reviewing. And yeah, that's it. And just also like if you've been reviewing PRs and working on a particular tool for some time, don't forget that you can always ask, like you can always propose yourself to become a reviewer and become for that tool. So if that's something that interests you, you can always go for it.
Cool. Thanks, Joelle. And thanks, Scott, for all of your input on the last discussion topic. And thanks, Bryce, for all of your work on all the Carvel stuff and your whole team there that's been helping out. It's truly appreciated. Really just excited for this continued collaboration and working together. And with that, thank you everyone for sticking around a little bit past and attending the meeting. And if you're watching this from home, come join us live. We'd love to meet you. And with that, see you next meeting. Thanks, everyone.